All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and get started. Be respectful of your time because you guys were on time. So, I believe we're recording. Let's just make sure I see the record there and the record there. So we should be all good. Welcome to Consolidated Streaming and Simulcast Workflows in Community Media, a terribly long name for something that's kind of simple. I'm Justin Cowgill. I'm the CTO at CreaTV San Jose, and we'll just kind of do some panel introductions and come back around to things.
Jesse Lerman, President and CEO of TelVue Corporation.
And I'm Dom Zamora, Media Distribution Coordinator at CMAC, which you guys had the fun to tour last night. I'm in charge of our cable channels.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and pose a couple questions just out to you guys right off the bat, because in our discussions, we have an idea of what we want to present to you, but we also want to know what you guys want, because that's half the fun of this, right? So it's not too overly formal in its presentation, but are you all here because you're like, well, how do I get on YouTube? How do I post multiple things out there? How do I get stuff back to my station? Like, where are y'all at? Anybody got anything that they're hoping to get out of it?
We have been classic peg channel for many years. We just bought a cast system with Roku. So we're trying to figure out what goes on that, what goes on the classic system, what do we screen, how do we do all of that.
Cool. Very cool. Anybody else? Any other hopes out of this or whatever?
I guess the OTT question was just interesting here. The universe is that, stability of OTT apps.
Very cool. That's great. So we'll try to keep all of those things in mind. Basically, we're going to start you off kind of with some stats, like why you should be thinking about this, and then we can get a little bit into the where, the how-to, and there's tips and tricks. If you have questions along the way, throw a hand up, and I'll try to address you so we can address stuff before we get too buried in there. And then we'll definitely leave some time for some Q&A and stuff. And do expect to hear different perspectives from all three of us. Because what you should, if you're going to take anything out of it, is to understand there's not one way to do it. There's many ways. So let's get started with our presentation here. I don't want to read off the screen, and we have to give a big thanks to Jesse because he provided some of this. We stole from an old presentation, so otherwise you'd have no visuals. So a huge thank you, Jesse. Are we not loud enough? Okay. Well, give it the gain, not there. You adjust it right. So if you're going to adjust, there we go. Okay, you want those levels there. So, I'm so hollow, and I'm feeding back. All right. So, cord cutting. How many people only focus on their cable channels right now? Show of hands. Be honest. How many people only focus on their cable channels? There's not you either do or you don't. Okay, good. You shouldn't be. How many of you watch linear television anymore? Sports fans? Or news? Do you watch anything else linearly? CSI, any major shows, anything? Anybody watch anything linear? Okay. Okay, but anything else? So there's your case in point. Nobody watches linear TV anymore. Look around your own room.
My audience is over 65 on linear television. They're not watching online, they're watching over air.
Okay, so I'll say this in the rude way. If you're looking to only keep that and watch your diminishing declines, right? Not saying linear matters. Don't ignore it. But the reality is, if you're not focused on the other, you're leaving the market behind because your market is always aging into. So OTT exists for a reason, and there's about a whole bunch of different platforms there, right? Why should you care? Well, these are some old numbers that we stole from the web, and they're from like 2022. So these have only gone up. And if you were to look at what some of those are, you would start to realize how much of this, and I'm going to go to the very next slide because I think it's more fascinating. This is the difference between people that are doing cord never is the very small numbers. The people that are doing subscriber-based platforms are the tallest numbers, and the cord cutters and how they are flowing. And the light color blue is from 21, the mid color blue is from 22, and the dark color is from 2023. So we're in 2025, and you can see how that escalation and how those things are shifting dramatically. Who here pays for cable TV? Thank you for supporting us all. Because without you all, we may not exist. But it is true, right? Like, technically, we should all be paying for it because we'd be paying for our own paychecks, right? Like, it's an important part of this. So we've got lots of reasons that you can do this. And I think right now I want to lean over towards Jesse a little bit and talk a little bit about why you might do that, kind of with this slide.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting trend. I know when Justin asked who out there is watching linear, not a lot of hands going up, but there is kind of a more recent trend in linear TV, which is, you may have heard the term FAST, free ad-supported streaming TV, which it's kind of funny that it's the new thing because it's really just the old thing, but it's now on the internet, right? So it was like, oh, for a while everyone was saying linear's dead. You know, there's going to be no linear. It's just going to be VOD, you know, other than, you know, tuning into live events. But there has been this phenomenon where all of a sudden linear's kind of hot again, you know, in over-the-top and streaming video, and it's now this model of ad-supported. So hey, you know, I can go watch, you know, all sorts of free linear channels, almost like a virtual cable lineup of all free channels, but they're going to be ads in the middle of it. So I'm watching some program. It's like, well, that's how it was when I grew up. That's how TV, you know, looked and felt. So kind of just curious, show of hands, has anyone played around with any of these new fast streaming platforms? It could be like Pluto TV, Plex TV. There's a, you know, whole growing number. There's the Roku channel. But anyway, so I think that's one of the things we're seeing just as a trend with online video in general, is that this ad-supported model is really taking off, whether that's in linear. Of course, there can be ad-supported within non-linear as well, you know, things like pre-roll, mid-roll ads. But you know, ad-supported versus subscription, these kind of models, there's a lot of, you know, kind of, you know, changing in the industry, and the latest trend has been that these ad-supported models have really started to increase.
But Jesse, you said the word we can't do on our channels. We can't have ads, right?
Well, can you on the internet?
Oh, that's right, because the internet's not the same as our cable
Right.
channel. Oh,
Exactly.
so that concept of selling stuff, you can, and anyone who tells you can't needs to get their head checked, because you can. There's not any one of our things out there that is controlling our streaming, right? Nothing. So don't be afraid of that, because as we just saw, how many people were cable subscribers? So you need some way of existing. Moving along into here, let's talk about how people are getting that over-the-top connection, which should drive a little bit about how you might think about where you want to be delivering. That big number where it says Smart TV, so all of you have an app for Smart TV, right? Not a chance. Do you know how many different smart TVs there are out there and how many different things there are? So you're not looking to be on that platform, even though that says 61.9%. But if you were to take Amazon Fire TV or Roku, right, if you just take those two alone, you're talking about almost the same amount. That's practically 60% of the market right there. So just by being on those two platforms, that's where people are really pulling things in. I think every vendor in that room there offers getting your content to those platforms. Smart TVs get tricky because it has to do with how they're distributed, how people download channels, right? Every time somebody actually has to download something, you have something that becomes a little bit more difficult. Amazon Fire and Roku, people are a little bit used to that. A lot of your smart TV subscribers use like the Samsung channel that's built into it, right? So you're not going to see as much adaptation and adoption there. And then an interesting one is, notice that number 9. You might have thought that might be a lot higher, right? Number 9 is Apple TV. That's only 4%. So for as much as how many people in here are on an Apple device in the room right now, whether it's their phone, their iPad, or their laptop, right? This industry is Apple fandoms, but Apple TV doesn't have the followers, right? So just be aware of that as we go through those things.
Probably because it's too expensive compared to a subsidized Fire Stick, which is just meant to get you to buy more stuff on Amazon.
They got my number. So we talked a little bit about it. Monetization. There are ways to think about this, right? So lots of different ways to think about how to do it. Jesse or Dom?
So, we already talked a little bit about ad-supported. We've covered that in a few ways. Another obvious, way to monetize is more subscription-based, like your Netflix subscription. There are tools out there where you can add things like paywall around your website, your mobile, your OTT apps, and that allows you to start to roll out these different types of models. There's transactional, or like a pay-per-view rather than a subscription where you pay monthly or yearly. Transactional, maybe I'm buying this particular access to this one video. That's more transactional. Then of course, donations is a great way to monetize it. Really, everyone, if you're not already doing it, you can do that easily on your website. Lots of great tools like, PayPal. And even if you're doing streaming, you don't even necessarily have to have that fully integrated. That could be built around it, like where you have your live stream, put a donation button from PayPal right underneath. Working with other partners, and of course underwriting. And underwriting works in a number of ways on cable. That is still perfectly valid, right? You can't have call to action type advertising on cable, but you can have sponsorship like PBS style. It's just an example idea. Kind of the reason for that graphic is, accessibility is a big deal, and you may be looking at, well, how do I, pay for adding captioning to all my programming? Well, that's a perfect opportunity for underwriting. Go get some local companies that are willing to, pay for sponsorship spots, captioning for this program or for these meetings, brought to you by no call to action, blah, 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 local bank. So a lot of different opportunities to monetize both on cable as well as, even more, of course, on streaming, because you don't have that restriction for, no call to action. You can do pure advertising. And that advertising could also include things like, we mentioned before, pre, mid, and post-roll ads. That's something you could do on your streaming, on your apps. Pre-roll ad, just like you're used to on YouTube. Someone clicks and boom, they're going to watch a 30-second ad. That could be something you've worked with local companies to pay for that type of sponsorship, and now they're getting more views on your streaming as well.
We're now getting national people willing to do that on local streaming.
Nice. So you're actively doing that now?
We get $50,000 a year out of the subscription.
You guys just heard that. That was $50K a year.
Yep.
Yeah, don't be afraid of it.
That's just high school sports.
I was going to say that's high school stuff.
Right, but you can find the right things to hook people in. And you're right, accessibility options is a huge one. People want to be associated with that. And I would argue that no matter what the platform, and you mentioned it, it's the those last three. We can do those on any of our channels. You can, as a 501c3 nonprofit, you can place a call to action for a donation. Right? You can't have your sponsor have that call to action. But that's, to your point, that's the underwriting, that's the partnerships. You can be showing those things, you can be splashing those on your OTT things, right? Simple things. There's branding associated to all of that.
A little careful the way you do it. Yeah.
You just have, and that gets tricky amongst your individual contracts. So I'll let your legal teams figure that out. But that's exactly right.
Just curious with the sports, how are you exploring like paywall monetization as well, where they pay subscription, or just using underwriting and
We were a typical pay channel. We used to do high school sports. NFHS Network came in.
Got it.
Said, you can't do that anymore, you have to do it with us. We said, okay. We now do 10 games a week with 3 different crews, and we get paid weekly about $100 a game to do that.
Absolutely.
Nice.
Adds up very good.
Yeah.
And it gives you relevance in your community too. That's probably the biggest benefit.
Well, we did just the opposite. They don't know who's doing it. They just know it's there. we don't take any credit, there's no street flashes, anything. And it works because I get an entire national audience paying to see.
Totally. Yep.
A little bit more. Oh, damn, that was loud. A little bit more to like underwriting or even grant funding. Not that we're doing it, but I know of another PEG station where they're trying, or they actually did get grant writing for closed captions, and it was through like a local foundation that they applied for, and they get that to support their closed captioning stuff. So I think it's really interesting to see all these potential opportunities for just different grant options, not just for closed captioning, just like any other programs that your PEG station can offer. So I highly recommend that every single one of you just like talk to your outreach and development team and just see like, hey, what potential grants can we apply for various things, right? And then that's just another route that you can take.
All right. So on that same thing, and we've already started covering some of it, what are the types of things that you can monetize, things that you want to be careful of? How many of you do government meetings? Yeah, probably don't want to do anything around monetization there, right? Let them pay for your services, but don't do that. You actually just nailed it with sports. The biggest thing with sports has to do with rights issues. So that's where I'd argue partnerships is the key, right? Partner with that. If you're a small city, partner with the local booster club, right? Find those partnerships, those avenues of ways of doing that. Back before streaming was a thing, you might have partnered with them to sell DVDs, right? Like the concept still exists, you just got to rework what it is. So, and then, probably the trickiest thing of everything within this becomes rights, right? Who owns the content? Therefore, how does it get tagged? Where is that at? If you're going, but somebody else owns the rights, we can't do that. Well, that depends on what your end user license agreement you have with folks bringing your content is, and YouTube is proof of that. Any one of us that's putting it out there, you think we own that content anymore? Not at all. We gave away the farm. So, but in certain cases, that's the necessary evil. So don't be afraid of it.
I was just going to say real quick, also, if you have, if you've built up a platform where you're in a position to, implement some of these monetization approaches, maybe you don't have the direct rights to something, but that's also a partnership opportunity. Maybe one of your contributors would love to explore some sort of, new revenue generation opportunities, and they're willing to make a deal. Like, look, we're the ones who have the whole platform, and we'll make it easy for you, and there's some rev share. So rights can maybe be negotiated and can be partnership opportunities.
So Jesse, you're talking like normal TV here. Like, oh wait, we have content people that actually would like to get paid and have a reason to show up, and you want to get their content and give people a reason to watch?
Yeah.
Crazy.
It is totally crazy.
So how would you approach that community producer in that conversation? Because from my experience, they're like, I get paid by YouTube, I get paid by this, I get paid by that. Why would I go on your channel?
That is a great question. I mean, obviously, I think on the, with the paywall monetization, it would be another avenue, right? I would, I don't know if you're going to get into, would you have a lot of leverage to say, well, look, we want to negotiate some kind of exclusive. We don't want you on YouTube. Probably not. I think it would be more that if it's interesting to them and they see it and you can make a case that that they can make some more revenue, it's just another outlet. And then that could be some additional incremental revenue. I don't have the magic formula for like what that rev share should be, but I think there's possibility there. It's just something to consider, that even if you don't have the rights, it may be worth a discussion around it if you have the tools to do it.
I agree, and I think the driving force behind that is chances are if they're coming to you in the first place, they understand why you're about the community. They're probably about the community, and if you're doing good, well, we have kind of a mantra at CreaTV. If you look good, we look good, right? That concept is the same, right? It works the opposite. If they look good, we look good, right? So if their content is doing well and helping the community, it can work both ways. So, and let's face it, if they're using you to get access to the gear and you've got them to understand why, well, you go away, you're not just a channel, right? You're all those other things. And so when they see that value and that the density of the proposition ad you have there, they might be more willing to be a part of that. So if they're just looking cut and dried bottom dollar, yeah, well, they're also going to have good luck with just their GoPro. So like,
One thing that I try to do when, people come to us for tours at CMAC, I always, it's really like a lot of youngsters, students, and they're always on their iPhones, right? And they're always talking about like I'm on TikTok or Instagram or whatever, cool. So one thing to really drive the point home, or the importance of cable television, is cool, yeah, you can all say that I go on YouTube on the simplicity of my own phone, I know how to get at Facebook, cool. But can every one of you say I'm also on cable television? And then I get some people just nodding their heads oh yeah, that's a good point. So just driving that importance back to just community based, right? So that's just another spin I like to put for the youngsters here locally.
And I'll back that up with, I think most people are trying to be on as many platforms as possible, right? Because the more eyes that you have, the more potential you have. So I think it is that. And what's the most unattainable item there? They can stream to all the platforms for free and they know it. How do you get on TV? How do you get on that other thing? It's still something cool. So may not have the same value tangibly.
Or even getting on the apps that you're providing too. They may be on TikTok and Instagram and all that, but do they have their content on your Roku apps and your Apple TV and Fire TV? It's just, this is more distribution too. So.
Exactly. So let's talk about what kind of providers and things that we can be out there. I think we're all fairly aware of this list, and it keeps growing and changing, right? You've got, I'm not going to read it off to you, but I would imagine most of us watch on most of these things. If I had to guess, the one that you will probably never find a PEG station, I'm not going to say never, but the odds of us finding ourselves there, Netflix. We probably won't end up on Netflix. You could be on Amazon, though. That's just making the deal with them. Hulu, same. So if you have the right content, there's an ends to a means to getting there. But it is about the content. It's a different way of thinking than we historically have thought, where we think about we are the provider. Now we're talking about the actual content, right?
Is there any reason not to do YouTube?
Well, actually, just I think one thing to distinguish here, I think it's probably important to distinguish between YouTube and really YouTube TV. So there's really two different things. YouTube, what everyone knows is, anyone can upload anything, and you can go, you just have, access to almost everything out there. YouTube TV is really more like a virtual cable provider that is YouTube's brand, where they're actually bringing you, linear channels and all that. So I think, to Justin's point, it's possible you could get your channel on YouTube TV if they were interested. But it's also a fair point right now. I don't think I've heard of any community media station that has gotten their channel on any of these platforms or fast channels.
Even on YouTube?
Not on YouTube TV. On YouTube itself, they can, because YouTube will take, live. There's YouTube Live, and I believe YouTube does allow 24/7 channels. You may have to have a certain profile, like a certain number of subscribers to get there, but I'm sure there are plenty of community media stations that are sending their channels 24/7 on YouTube. Yeah, you do that? Yeah.
A lot of government channels are just going on YouTube.
Yep. Yeah. And again, depending on the content, there are, many community media stations are hesitant to, use YouTube as their primary for a few reasons. One is, their rights issues and copyright issues are a pain, and kind of very little control. And then if you get a hit, like a copyright strike, there's kind of nothing you can do about it. It's not like a tech support person to call and be like, come on, it's just gone, right? You have your graduation and they're playing Don't Stop Believing by Journey in the background. Boom, you're off. Right? So, yeah, I think it's great. Government meetings, you're less likely to have that kind of copyright issue.
Let's look at community strikes, because public comments are saying things that don't fall in line, or you don't even necessarily know what caused it. We had that happen 2 or 3 times.
Yeah. That's a fair point. So, it's great. YouTube's, it's free, right? You can use it easily for free. There's monetization opportunities, but there are other issues around that. And I think that's why, we see a lot of community media stations that will go for, some type of platform that they have full control over for their streaming. So, there's a mix out there.
And I think government meetings specifically, that's more about just hitting openness. Where can you hit the most people? And like a lot of governments, I encourage to do a minimum of 2 streams, right? YouTube, I consider the backup. And then if they're Granicus or whatever else but have 2 different things because they may not be working. But to that rights issue, have any of you ever fought any of those?
Yeah.
How many of you have won?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it seems like it's the unattainable. It's just a little bit of work. Now, the other part of that is if you've done your homework in advance, any graduation I do knows that music isn't playing because I'm not taking the hit. So, well, it's not even that. So we pre-coordinate with the group, right? When are we going live? Great. You can play this music at this point, and then there's a cutover time when they want us to go live, and now you need to be on rights-free music.
Just sitting there listening to my fader.
Yep.
When I hear it, it goes down.
Yep, but that's exactly the point. And that's the point. You play through that.
Just the mention of DirecTV reminds me of the old DirecTV satellite.
It's exactly the same. I mean, you're not going to be on necessarily their cable platform, but it is a streaming service through them.
The satellite, they still have a satellite network?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
They still exist.
Hey, it's not part of it.
Yeah.
I remember Free Speech TV used to be on DirecTV.
Yeah. DirecTV and Dish all still exist. So, yep.
But they had launched the streaming service as well to get into the whole over-the-top streaming.
Well, they rebranded Uverse to DirecTV, or no, AT&T Uverse to DirecTV.
Right.
Yeah, because they are now one and the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. DirecTV is AT&T. Yeah. All right. Moving along here a little. So other huge advantages, we should add that there. User experience. How many of you like having to flip through random channels on your cable TV or your cable guide or whatever, right? Not a fun experience, right? And user experience is probably the biggest marketing thing that ever exists. You've got all kinds of things associated to your marketing, and then I'm going to jump to the very bottom as an engineering geek in there. Quality of service. I don't know what Comcast, as a person who provides it to Comcast, what they're doing to my signal, what their compression rate is, what it's going to do to my colors, or how it's going to turn out. And I get people all the time going, my sound sucks on this. I'm like, well, it's because your levels were wrong. And people don't necessarily understand that. Where do I have control over that? Streaming, right? I know what the compression rate's set to. I know where those things are set to and what we're trying to manage and get to. And you can not guarantee, but you have a better idea of what that end result's going to be.
With the one caveat that with streaming, what you don't control is whether the pipe is going to 100% keep up, whereas the traditional cable TV, they may be mashing your signal, they may be doing some things to it, but most of the time it's there. It's not dropping in resolution because there was a flood of internet bandwidth, cutting in and out because of your Wi-Fi. So it's a trade-off, right?
And not just yours, the end streamer. It's both, right? What you're pushing out can go down, and what somebody else happens, right? We're all here in a hotel. Streaming signal here is great, right? How many of you paid the $5 a day? Anybody? Yeah, no, right? So good luck streaming right now because it's not going to happen, right? But if we were to pay that $5 a day, right, you might have that better quality. So just think it's multiple end pieces there. So what about your own apps, right? We talked a little bit about branding in there. What about having your own apps on some of these platforms? So some examples of that are you can have one built on for the App Store, right? Now there's multiple ways of viewing that. You have Apple TV proper, iOS, which is going to span both phone and iPad, but you can have different look and feels across that. And then there's Mac OS. Most people are leaning on Apple TV and mobile devices. I don't think we have one in here. how many of you watch streaming on your laptop versus how many of you watch streaming on either a small mobile device like this or an iPad? Show of hands. If you're a mobile device, it doesn't have to be iPhone, just mobile device. Okay? How many of you watch it on a computer? Like, okay, now we're going to ask it differently. As your primary way of viewing streaming content, how many of you watch on a computer? How many of you watch on a mobile device?
How about on a TV, when we say streaming content?
Totally.
The primary.
Right? So you're going to find different factors in that from your market. The biggest factor is even your lowest, or not low, all factors of your community have this. Right? These are handed out to the homeless. Like, everyone has one of these. This is your lowest common denominator now. So Apple TV or Mac or, Google Play Store, right? Don't just, we all get caught up in that there's a whole host of people that play over an Android world. But also understand that your look and feel in Android world, like there's somewhat of a guarantee because of how Apple controls their devices. There's less control in the Android world because there's flexibility there, which is kind of a fun thing too. And then there's things like Amazon Fire TV and through their services, Apple TV. Those are going to have that same look and feel. Roku, going to have your same look and feel. And then obviously your website. Who here does not, I don't want to put somebody else, well, who is streaming to their website? At least in some capacity. Okay? Okay, anybody, not because they don't know how to stream to their site or their platforms don't? Just curious, because I want to take you to a few booths.
Back to rights.
Rights?
Very difficult if you stream to your website with rights or stream to somebody else. In other words, I can put stuff on my website, but I can't put on YouTube.
That all depends on how your agreements for when people are submitting content are written. That's and you control that power. That doesn't mean there's not other politics.
I have a license to do music on my website, but not on YouTube.
Yep.
So
Yep, totally. Licensing is a whole nother aspect of that. The hardest part on our websites is it's the hardest place to get people to go to because it's a dedicated spot they have to go to. Even when you're an app. Now, let's talk a little bit about that. Are we at? Yeah, so if you're pushing out to these different platforms, right? What platforms do you want to push out to? All of them, right? Do you want a self-branded app? Or do you want to be a part of something bigger? So I'll give an example. I'm trying to not get into each manufacturer, so I'm going to avoid the specific manufacturer I'm thinking of. But if you have your own branded channel app for all of these platforms, everyone has to download your channel. If you are a part of somebody else's bigger app, people will find your channel, right? That's that whole thing back to like, if you could get on Apple TV or on YouTube TV, Netflix, Pluto, right? Because people already have that app, your content would be presented to people. Versus when you have just your own branded app, the branding's fantastic, but people have to know to download you in the first place.
Which is also another trade-off, because you can get drowned out being in a larger app with just your piece. Now there's all this other stuff in there. So certainly one key, I think, regardless, like when you get on an app, whether it's your own branded or you're part of some larger app, there's marketing involved. It's not just like, yay, I got an app, I did it. Now you got to actually start marketing it. But there are a lot of effective tools, like most of these app platforms. If you do launch your own branded app, there are links you can provide for someone to click on, and it will take them right to adding that app. So those should be all over your website. You know, you can watch us here, you can put nice graphics, you know, you should be putting them out on your social media. Remember, you can also watch us here, click here to get our Roku channel. So definitely trade-offs, but any which way, marketing is a key component.
And also too, whenever you guys buy a brand new device, whether it's a laptop or a smartphone or nowadays all these smart TVs, these devices already come pre-installed with a lot of different apps. So like the end user, the buyer, doesn't really have to do much extra work aside from either creating a brand new account or just log into their existing account. All you have to do is just brand yourselves like, hey, we are on YouTube, or we are on Facebook, or we are on Roku. We have our app already on Roku. Oh, cool. I already have Roku on this smart TV, right? Let me just find, in this case, CMAC or CreaTV or whatever the case may be. These companies already do like half the work for you. You just have to create your app or just brand yourself, market yourself.
If you want a perfect example, UCTV
Yep.
is a wonderful example of how to do marketing and
But the other part of that is you can do both. You can be on a platform and you can have a channel. Now, the one caveat I'll throw to everyone about how many people think you buy once, cry once? Right? You buy gear, you buy once, cry once. That is the biggest lie anyone has ever told you. I don't care if you buy a building, if you build, or whatever you do, you will always be buying something again. So it's not buy once, cry once. Nothing lasts a lifetime. And so just know that like when you build an app, there's going to be ongoing costs with it, right? You're going to need to update it. You're going to, just like your marketing needs to be refreshed. Otherwise it gets stale. And there was a question out here. Yeah.
The question I was going to ask you directly addressed it. Do people do both? Do they have their own? Because you control that, and you can't control the Netflix doesn't want to put your stuff on, right? And so, how does that work? Can you do both?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it comes down to, you know, it's a fair point. You know, generally you're probably looking to get as much distribution as possible. You want to get as many eyeballs, you want to get as many viewers. Obviously, you know, whole different implications whether you're trying to monetize or not, you know, all the rights, but generally, you know, the idea of like, look, if you can fairly easily, and it's not, you know, breaking the bank to get your own, you know, branded apps, great, you know, do that. You have complete control. That's really good for, obviously, for your own marketing and branding. You're driving people to you. But if you have a partnership opportunity and someone else has an app, you know, whatever, it could be the local PBS station has an app and they love a program that you produce, and you're like, hey, let's make a deal and we'd like to get in your app, which has even more eyeballs. That's great too, and you'll drive, you know, you'll probably get more people learning about you that way. So it's kind of the more the merrier.
And the trickiest part of getting on those bigger apps that you might want to be on, it's back to you have to have content that they want. You have to have a rhyme and a reason for them to want to be there. Who here remembers the movie Wayne's World? While it seems like a joke, it's actually not necessarily a pipe dream. But what the cautionary tale in there, right? Don't lose yourself and your identity by being what you don't want to be. So you do have to be careful if you're going to play with the big boys. Anybody here ever work for a major network or real broadcast TV? Right? When you've played in that arena, you know. But then now that if you're playing in this arena, you also know this is a really cool arena. What you might think is this really cool thing up there isn't. It's kind of gross. So, totally. And it does not pay well. No, I had way more stress, way less pay. Yeah, anyhow, totally. So, moving through some of this, though, don't forget the social platforms. That's why we were kind of differentiating YouTube and YouTube TV. YouTube TV is more of an OTT. YouTube itself is a social platform, right? You have commenting, you have that engagement. But that's the other thing to remember. Dom, can we engage on these platforms?
Yes, we can.
But why would we want to do that?
Just engage with your viewers. And then some of these platforms, like in YouTube in particular, their whole algorithm is like, hey, if you have more people communicating on your platform, it's giving us a reason, the algorithm, to showcase your work on here. It's like, hey, there's a lot of interaction here, so let's just drive more traffic to your channel, in this case, YouTube in particular.
And then we're back to promoting our apps and where to watch. That is probably, I will say that is my company's probably biggest drawback. I don't think we promote ourselves in that regard enough, right? We might self-promote for the right things, but if you're not constantly doing that, right, you're always looking for new viewership.
That's a kind of interesting question. From what I've kind of seen, at least here, with like the government entities, because like we'll push out their meetings to both Facebook and YouTube. I noticed that we disable those chats just because, for obvious reasons, especially during the pandemic with the Zoom calls and all that stuff. If you guys know about that kind of sort of ordeal. But yeah, for the most part, the live chats, we have disabled them.
So it depends. So most of the government agencies I've worked with, it is asked that they're disabled, and that is from their legal team, and that will depend. Their greatest concern is actually that the council members will be watching and responding. And not necessarily responding here, but responding in person, and they're not allowed to give that feedback, right? They're not supposed to be able to take something and just instantly feedback. So that's their reasoning for not wanting that. I think it depends on your content, right? If you're doing a public access live call-in show, why wouldn't you use that as part of like the chat line and just address it? Talk about audience engagement, right? You're literally, instead of having to call in, they're able to be a keyboard warrior and have that chat with you. Like there's so many good things that can come from that. But I think that's where we also get into how do you consolidate those chats? Because at that point you might be pushing out to Twitch, in a number of platforms, right? And so are you using the right tools that are consolidating your chats so that you're able to watch and engage them and then pushing them back out on other things?
I work for a government agency, and my city was the opposite of that. They said, no, we cannot disable the chat for freedom of speech concerns. I disagreed, but that was the lawyer made that decision. But then one day I noticed in council meetings, we're streaming on Facebook, and people were chatting, and no one's answering. They think that you're watching it, so if they're gonna have them there, someone needs to engage with it because they're just talking to the wall. And then they get angry because I'm yelling there on Facebook, and no one's watching.
But that's actually the point is it's your legal team who's deciding that. Like none of us are making that call, right? The worst is when you're supposed to have it disabled and you have not disabled it. That's when you get yelled at, and I'm sure it's the opposite, right? If you have disabled it and they're like, why is that disabled, right? So, right? You're crushing me. Yeah. So anyhow, moving right along. So talking about how we might be able to do some of this distribution, right? So that was why and where we want to go to. How might we get there? Well, how many of you think that you are going to house a server at your facility and all the streaming services you're going to provide, they're going to come in and just stream right off your server? I can tell you in 2008, that was most of us as access centers. And you know what you found out? How many of you have a basic Comcast internet at your building? How many of you have like a gigabyte of connectivity symmetrically up and down? Right? That's now a thing now. In 2008, 2010, no. And we thought we were going to have people coming in. So the point is you need something that is a content delivery network. You need something to push out. That's probably the number one reason to push to YouTube, or why so many people did. The cost of a CDN can be astronomical. Luckily, most of the partners in that room out there provide some level of that as a service. If you, whichever manufacturer you utilized for your playback, generally has something to offer these days to help support this so that you aren't wearing the burden of this. But it's important to understand that, and that how important it is, because it doesn't take much and you shut down your own internet, right? Because they're literally coming onto your server in your facility, right? So you want to be pushing out somewhere. You want to be getting that information out there. And then I'm going to highlight something here that I don't think many people will notice. It says deliver once to CDN, and it says 4 megabits per second. Does anyone know what that means? Basically, what we're saying is in your live stream, you're only going to have to utilize 4 megabits to stream out. 4 out of your gigabit. So you're hardly using anything, but you're pushing that out. And I highlight that because a lot of people go, how many of you are the videographers in the room are going, 4 megabits? That sucks. Why are you using such low quality? Well, that's all you need to push out for your live stream. How many of you are hoping that we're going to be doing 4K pushes anytime soon? Okay, good. We got practical people in the room. So HD at 4.5 megabits. Really, you want 5 megabits of space because you need room for your audio in there. That's all you need.
Yeah, just a fair point. It was nice to see some hands raised with, a gig connection, but, we just see, such a variety, and, there are stations where this 4 megabit per second still poses a problem. So depending on what other traffic is being shared, we'll have stations that are like, we're having some problem with our live stream, and it's like, it always happens at certain time of day where then you do a little digging. It's like, that's also when we are trying to upload everything here and down, and you're like, well, you got to get a bigger pipe. So thankfully, costs have come down. It's gotten a lot better, but it's still, still for many stations, they don't really have very big pipes, and they do have to budget carefully, and sometimes that means going even lower. I mean, you can still get a pretty good quality, HD signal even at like 2. Or 1.75, decent, and you may have to dial that depending on your own bandwidth needs.
Completely agree. Now, remember, that's also per channel. How many of you do more than one channel out of your station, right? So if you've got 4 channels, that's 16 megs. Now, the other thing is people get really caught up and they get like, oh, look, Comcast is offering me 250 megabits. That's download. What's your upload? In this case, you care about that up. So that's the important part to remember. And I agree, Jesse, there's a lot of things out there. But you can now do it from cellular. Like you legitimately can. It's for the most part reliant enough in certain areas. But there are still communities that suffer from connectivity. And that's exactly right, where you're going to fight that. And then the other half of that is you're going to suffer if you're on the far reaching ends of where that technology has been pushed. So if you're on the fringe edge of any kind of distribution for AT&T, Comcast, Verizon, name your provider, you're gonna see speed loss suffering. So there are different solutions out there. Like you can do things to bond things, right? You can grab multiple connections and bond them. So streaming protocols are highly important. We're not going to try to get into too much alphabet soup, but it's important to be aware of what protocol you're using. So just we can do another show of hands. On your website, how many of you tell your content producers you need to submit a .mov or a .mp4? How many people have that as their phrasing as to what needs to be submitted? Stop. You're doing yourself a disservice. That's a file extension. That's not your protocol. That's not the thing that you're trying to do. And while it seems user-friendly, we're not educating people then, right? And that's where we end up with this confusion about how to do things, how to bring things in. Your extension type can matter on some systems. I don't think any system in there cares the difference between MOV or MP4 right now at all. But they do care about the transport that's utilized, how that compression happened, what its frame rate, what its resolution. That stuff all matters because it's also going to be how that translates to your platform. You can shoot video vertically, but you probably don't want to show it on a horizontal channel. Right? So, but that being said, I think we were talking about CMAC. You guys did a whole bunch with the news organization recently to ensure that the voter guides didn't just go out this way. They went out vertically, right? Reaching a different market, reaching a different audience in a different way. So you're not just using your playback system, you're thinking about stuff. But that means you have to create the content in the right way because this and this do not mesh at all.
Maybe just a few other, again, not to go over all the nitty-gritty details, but when it comes to streaming protocols, probably good to be aware of 2 things. There's the protocol that may be used to deliver your stream. Could be from your event side. Like let's say you're doing a live basketball game and you want to go to YouTube or you want to go up to another provider service. You typically will have some kind of encoder. It could be built into your live production software, hardware, and that encoder is using one of these protocols to get the stream up to the CDN or the provider like YouTube. And then the other side is when that provider or your own website streaming or your own apps what protocol are they using to then deliver the streams when your viewers actually mash a button to say, I want to watch it. And they're not always the same protocols. It's kind of been veering over time. On the ingest side, so how do you get it in? For the longest time, I would say RTMP. You probably have come across that. That's pretty predominant out there. It's kind of funny because it's kind of sort of like actually an EOL like standard, but it just took hold and everyone still is using it. There's one other one that's starting to take hold you may see from time to time is called SRT. It's Secure Reliable Transport. What that does really well is it has error correction built into it. So the whole thing about SRT versus RTMP is if that that network connection or the bandwidth starts to break apart, suddenly you don't have enough bandwidth, there's some dropouts. RTMP is not going to do a very good job in that case, whereas SRT is designed specifically for that. So it's designed for over the public internet where you're going to have, kind of lossy and you don't really have that QoS control. So you're going to start to see more and more of the encoders you're using, the software you're using, you'll start to see this SRT thing. It's a pretty good thing to use, and more CDNs are starting to accept SRT directly. For the delivery side, I would say predominantly now HLS. That's Apple's HTTP live streaming protocol. That is the predominant way to deliver. There are other ones like Dash that are out there. But so ingest, mostly RTMP, starting to see SRT creep in. And then on the delivery side, mainly HLS. There are some issues around latency, like the good old HLS most everyone uses actually isn't that good at keeping up with real time. Each client may buffer a different amount before it starts playing, and it's not uncommon to be a good 30, 60 seconds off of quote unquote real time. There are some real-time versions of HLS, and that's something that's coming out and starting to become more predominant as well. But those are some of the most common ones out there.
So, does our our content being live matter? Like how real-time live matter?
I do a 4-second delay, and nobody knows.
I say, so when you have people complaining about delay, it's because they're using the wrong tool to have an end game thing, right? A lot of cities will complain about delay. They're watching the live stream in their offices going, well, but I needed to run down at a certain time to be in there for a thing. Well, that means you need to watch on the local TV where we can control that delay a lot better, right? The internet introduces a lot of latency that we have no control over beyond just the stream, right? Like it's out and back. And then just kind of moving through that, let's also think about when we're talking about what we're talking about today, not just pushing out to those OTT, what about when you are at a live event? How are you getting that back to wherever you're getting it back to? So here, how many people do remote things that, so not in your PEG center or government center, but you're somewhere else and you go live, whether that's live back to your channel or live on some stream, right? Almost everybody does something like that. Who's using LiveView? Okay. Who's using Teradek? Who's using Aja Helos? And what am I forgetting? What other brand? Huh? QVideo? Okay. High Vision? Okay, so if you're using High Vision, you're doing probably SRT, right? Totally. And so that's the point. You're using different parts and pieces there. And I would make the argument, if you're doing a backhaul to your station, SRT is the right answer. Big picture, because it's what deals with that latency. That is you may not realize it, but if you're recording back at your station, that RTMP may think it's coming in cleanly, but then when you have put it on your encoder and you've now compressed it again on that record, and now you go to play it back out, and you kind of go, why does it look so muddy? Because you took a compressed signal that broke up partway through, and then you compressed it some more. So you removed more information from it. That's what compression's doing. So think about which protocols you're using as you're going through those things. All right. Low latency protocols like you talked about there. I didn't keep up with these. Video codecs, you will start to see more and more things say H.265, but for as much as they're pushing it, I don't see many things doing it yet. Jesse, have you?
It's kind of the classic, the timing that we saw actually with H.264 as well. I mean, there was a time when MPEG-2 dominated and everyone was talking about H.264 is going to be the next big thing. It just takes time, partly because of the compute power and the change in compute power to deal with these newer protocols. So remember, everyone was like, oh, H.264 is going to be the greatest thing. And you know what it took to actually compress H.264 back in, like, I don't know, the late, mid-90s or whatever it was. Yeah. It was like, oh, yeah, we're doing this, and we take 30 computers and network them together, and we can get this done in an hour. Well, okay. So, I think we're kind of in that situation with H.265 now where, it takes longer to encode. It takes more horsepower on the devices. Not every device has the compatibility. So it's a matter of time. It'll get there, but it feels to me right now that we're not there. You're still seeing predominantly H.264 based streaming.
And that's that same point. RTMP and H.264 are just kind of one of those holding on, kind of like the good old VGA cable that held on forever. This is one of the first conferences I've been to in a while where that wasn't an option here. Thankfully, because I haven't seen one on a laptop in a long time, at least not a new one. But that same concept comes with the benefits of H.265. So if you do have a platform that accepts it, and if you do have the hardware that accepts it, you're going to get a better quality stream at a lot less bandwidth to accomplish the same thing. So what that means is if you've already got the bandwidth of what you need for H.265, you can now up your bandwidth, right? And now you're going to see even more come through. Like if you're trying to do HDR, don't do HDR in H.264. H.265, you might look at it, right? Like there are things like that where you're going to see some benefits. And yes, it all depends on your back end that you're pushing to. What's the most important part about video? Thank you. Anybody else says anything else, please leave. There's the door. So don't forget your audio codecs when you're doing this, right? They take the lowest amount of bandwidth for doing our streams, but they are the most important part of it. If you don't have good, clean audio, I think we have that dialed in right now, you're not conveying your messages, right? So think about those and which codecs you're using and why. And I think if I'm reading this right, AAC is probably the predominant at this point.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's an Apple codec, right? That's basically where all of that comes from, just like HLS. So some of these things are being pushed by certain manufacturers, but some of those are because they took the time very early on to be developing the protocols to help engage in where those things came from. How many people do any of their streams in Dolby or push out anything in Dolby? Dang it, I was really hoping. I don't either, I dream. So ever listen to a football game and think it sounds terrible, like the mix is wrong? How many of you don't have surround sound at home? If you don't have surround sound on, that's why the football game sounds bad now. It is mixed for Dolby. Turn on 7.2, and it's going to sound great. Encoders and transcoders, kind of talked about that. Most of you all have most of what we've talked about, and you're all probably doing it. Now, how many of you are streaming with a device from a venue to YouTube or Facebook directly? Okay. How many of you are streaming with that device from a venue back to your station? Okay. How many of you are streaming to more than one place at a time? Are you using, how many of you are using multiple encoders to do that? Okay. If that means those of you that are doing multiple streams, are you streaming to Restream? Nobody's using Restream. Okay. How many's using Teradek Cloud? Okay. And what are you pushing to push multiple streams then? Switchboard?
Direct to AWS.
So you're going to AWS and then pushing, okay? You find that's user-friendly?
No.
Exactly. How many of you want to do multicast streams? Probably the... So what I'm saying, when I'm referring to multicast in this regard, there's a different multicast, but if I am streaming from a football game and I want this to go to Amazon or Apple, I want this to go to YouTube, I want this to go to Facebook, and I want it to come back to my channel, and I want to do it at the same time, CreaTV uses our Teradek Cube to stream to Teradek Cloud, And from there, I can use a decoder to pull it down for the channel, but I can do RTMPs out to both Facebook and YouTube. And I use RTMP, and I don't use the built-in, like log in and use the YouTube or Twitch or Facebook application. And that's not a part of this, but if you want to know why, meet me some other time out here and I'll tell you why. But think about how you can push that, right? Your channel matters, but you can be pushing to multiple places. And it can come at different costs. AWS is probably one of the easiest ways fiscally, but one of the most difficult ways for an end user. Things like Restream, Teradata Cloud are much more user-friendly. So it depends on who your operators are and what involvement you need them to have in that process. And there's other things. That's just the ones that came to mind.
And there's Vimeo actually has restreaming as well, I think probably from their acquisition of Livestream. There's Caster.io is another one someone mentioned, Switchboard. So there's a whole bunch of those types of restreaming services.
Yep, and they all just have, not one of them is perfect. So there's quirks to them all.
Yeah, even talking about like Restream, they have, if I remember correctly, they have like the free version that you can like run on the browser, and then they have like paid plans, so you can kind of see like what the perks are, what are you willing to invest as a station, and then just invest in the free one and just see what it can do, and if you like it, great. If you want to invest, go for it. But Restream in particular, from what I've seen, is a nice alternative to just push out to multiple platforms at once, and you just log into each of your accounts, so it's a nice feature.
But let's define that word free. Free always comes at a cost.
This is true.
So we just kind of talked about the backhaul, and notice the big highlighted word there is SRT. How many of you use Wi-Fi to do that? Like you're at the school or wherever you're at, and you use Wi-Fi to make the stream happen. I used to be the person who would tell you that's a terrible idea, but it's actually a real practicality now, because schools have upped the quality of what they're offering. And if you've made the right arrangements, don't be afraid of it. But one of the best things you can have is a hardwired connection in some cases. If you didn't know, if they haven't pre-provisioned the network port that you're plugged into, or if they have, but you have an operator plug it into the wrong device in your system, you can lock yourself out of that connection real fast. Whereas your Wi-Fi, you're less likely to run into that. So there's a number of things that can happen within the process of where you're at, how things connect, and what can happen. So depending upon the connection and what they have set up, it does matter. Come on, click. How many of you stream your channels 24/7? Right? Any reason the rest of you don't? Do you put it behind a paywall, or do you just, it's only on the paywall is coming? So 24/7 streaming will be behind a paywall.
Yeah, we're evaluating that as an option.
Totally. So the only place that you're 24/7 in a live aspect is on your cable channel then. Totally, right? Who owns the content rights for most of your content?
Well, there it's focused on our content. So it's content we've developed, custom and aggregated, either developed or aggregated.
Right, because your time and effort's actually worth something. So don't devalue yourself. That's kind of where we started this, right? So live events. So think about this. If at the bottom there you've got a live event, you're pushing it out. You could push it out back to your station for your playout recording coder, put it out to your channel and streaming. But as we just talked a second ago, don't be afraid to do it the other way, which would be to push to a CDN, and that can get back to your playback, but that's also where you can then alternatively hand out to something else, right? So don't be afraid of those other ways.
And also can be a, kind of cost practicality trade-off as well. There can be some utility to going live directly back to the station and out from there. If that is less expensive, that may not require a third-party service to pay for these other services we talked about. They have varying degree of cost. So yeah, it can really depend on, what is the best pathway to get a clean signal. you may be at a location where getting back to master control just doesn't make sense. It's going to be very difficult to do that with any kind of quality then, but you may have a good handoff point to a cloud streaming service, and then that's kind of a no-brainer. That's the way to do it there. Other places you may be on net, at that event, and you're actually technically right on network with your master control. That's kind of a slam dunk to go that way. So, yeah, based on, the actual location, the networking, and the cost may determine, and we find a lot of stations wind up doing a hybrid. They do a mix of both, depending on the scenario.
And for anybody who wants these slides after, email me and we'll distribute these. That we all agreed we'll get these out to people. So if you need more data from them, but don't be afraid to pull your content from the web either. Right? There's lots of great resources there. And while our focus probably should be on local, be on like what makes us unique, we also talked about what drives people to want to watch our content and everything in the first place. So classic arts, right? Free Speech TV, NASA TV, Democracy Now!, all of those have a value add. I can assure you the number of times my channel gets a phone call. If I'm getting a phone call about programming, I'm putting money on it's either one of two producers that don't know how to set their audio levels and are upset, or something went wrong with Democracy Now! Airing. Right? Sad, because it's like, why are you coming here for this? But the point is, it's viewership. It's somebody engaging on your platform. It matters. So don't forget that. Now, moving into the scary bits of what we all have to do a little bit more of. Yeah.
You had adaptive bit rate on one slide. Let me go back to it. But,
This one at the bottom of it, ABR.
just wondering if all the content really know what to do with the bit rate these days, like some not.
So also depends on how it's getting delivered. So you can deliver ABR where your encoder is actually doing the adaptive bit rate, will deliver that up to the CDN, and then the CDN is redistributing that. Other CDNs like YouTube, for example, when you go to YouTube Live, they're strict, they want to control everything, and they're going to have kind of the same consistent encoding. So they just want you to send the highest quality, and then they're going to do the transcoding in the cloud. That type of transcoding can get pretty expensive. So really depending on the type of application, but it's not surprising that a YouTube is going to be doing that all internally. There may be other services that will take the adaptive coming in, but if you only send them a single rate, they're only going to deliver, or they may charge a little more for that.
And then I think the other part to understand about adaptive bitrate is it's not as important as it once was. Right? We used to really need adaptive bitrate because this device and that device had vastly different resolutions, right? The more important about that is meeting somebody's speed quality so that you're still having that quality going there. So it kind of depends on what matters to you as to where you should focus within that.
Still, to a degree, I would say, maybe more for mobile, because, you can't always guarantee you're on you have a good signal. There is some benefit to having a degree of adaptive, because there are times where that, low end 256K, at least someone's getting a stream. They're not locked out. If they're, suddenly they're, in a little bit of a dead zone and they're not getting signal, it's nice to be able to keep that stream going. And on the phone, the 256K, resolution-wise, that's not so bad. Obviously, on a big TV, a giant 70-inch TV, that's not going to look too good. But I think there's still, reasons why adaptive is important, and it's still good to do it when you can. But you can usually get by with even single rate in many cases.
But to that, it also goes to think about your audience and how many of them have the latest and greatest phone. How many of them have an iPhone 4? Right? Like where they're at, their tools and what they are. Your audience always matters, right? And you're going to have a wide-ranging audience. You've got to figure out how to meet that audience's needs. So, all right, diving back to captions. So, captioning on your channel is relatively easy. Captioning with multiple languages, with descriptive captions, with all kinds of other things gets much harder on our channels. You know where it's a lot easier? Online platforms. So how many people have one language on their channels. And I mean that's the people producing content only submit in one language. Okay. My station has 8 different languages between channel content that's coming in, right? So start to think about how many people did they say the Valley here in the morning plenary, right? Like, was it 7? What was the number? Right? So 25 different languages within the out here, right? So think about where you're at. Think about who you're serving. Like, how do you connect those communities and how do you achieve that? And there are a number of AI solutions, even though that's really a kitschy phrase. A lot of these are using AI as a marketing term and not truly. Now, there are also some of the partners, I think all of the, at least 2 of the providers for playback here are using true AI to help create that. What was it you guys are doing now? The
automatic summarization and chapterization for meeting agendas in sports.
Exactly. And that starts to come with, that's going to be ultimately what gets you to descriptive audio, is you need a tool like that, because unless you're going to sit there and go, oh, well, wait, I saw this now. Because that's what it takes for somebody to do it otherwise, right? Somebody has to sit there and do it. That's not a practical use of time or means, right? AI is fairly easy in that regard.
Does everyone know what Justin means by the descriptive audio? Is that?
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, there are some pretty cool AI tools out there already that, it looks very promising. It seems like a very difficult task for AI, but, I've played around a little bit and I was kind of shocked at how good of a job it did at coming up with AI-based, audio description. So it'll be coming very soon.
All right. So moving through on that, that's kind of where we were getting to, is that there is lots of different accessibility that comes with it. So don't be afraid of using AI and using a variety of tools. So I'm trying to remember. So this particular thing, think about all the other bits that you could be putting in that makes your content more searchable, right? So notice that 35% of that is about getting the tags. That's huge. How do you think anybody here not know what SEO is? Search engine optimization, okay? So that's how when you're searching for something, well, AI is what's now doing most of that search, right? You now get when you type in a search on Google or just in your browser, right? It comes back with like an AI description and comes back with that. If you're not putting tags in your videos, that's why they're not getting hits. That's why they're not getting views. But with AI, you can get everybody's name. You can get the teams that they're playing for, the schools or the location that you're at, right? You're putting in stuff that helps pull people in and engage them. So it expands your audience just by using those tools.
Really, that captioning, like we're saying, it's so much more than, the accessibility part alone is crucial, but there's even more reason. Sometimes, we hear a station may say, well, do we really have to do that? Maybe we don't need to do that for the government meetings, because of upcoming DOJ regulation, but what about everything else? But the reality is not only is it great for accessibility, which has high value in itself, but it unlocks so many other things once you have that transcript that, the captions effectively give you a transcript, and there's a whole slew of other AI and automation features that can be built around those transcripts.
And the right AI tools are going beyond that, doing facial recognition, doing things. Now, sometimes you have to do some correction because not all those tools are built out yet, but there are ways to just keep building and building upon that. Yeah.
What are the best programs or services for the AI, for the captioning? I just use YouTube, and what do you guys recommend?
Yeah, there's so many. It's actually amazing how many new ones have sprung up, but just, naming some of the ones in the industry, you have Speechmatics is a very good one. There's Rev.ai, there's Assembly AI, Deepgram is another one. Who else?
AWS.
Yeah, AWS Transcribe, I think they call it. They have their own. And interestingly, I think OpenAI, I think ChatGPT basically can do it too now. You can give it, audio. I'm not quite sure they have like the same API hooks Most of the other companies I mentioned will give you a lot more, not just the transcript, but they may offer certain, topic analysis. Sentiment analysis is a big one because it's used a lot in things like call centers and, or were people happy with the call and the support call they just had, but could be pretty interesting and scary for government meetings too. See what the sentiment and
Well, but to,
Putting a lot of monitors.
yeah. So the other part that comes back to the AI and the tool, it's about workflow. So the biggest thing I'd say in a center, it's the same reason that your playback system matters. Every one of those solutions does their job pretty darn well. There's nuances that makes each one of them do their bits maybe a little bit different or a little bit stronger, and that's the same truth with any automated captions or any AI tool you're using. But because it takes engagement with it, the AI tool you use and how it works for your overall workflow is what matters, right? If all you do is something within your playback system, probably their tool's the best, right? But if you're doing other things and those tools don't tie with that, you might need a different workflow. So it just depends on what your overarching pieces are.
You can do it directly in Premiere now too. So you do it before you export, you get everything done, generate it in Premiere, export the caption files, and upload them wherever you want to do it.
Yep, and it's ridiculously scary how accurate it is.
There's also some benefit to, doing that type of captioning, file-based when you can, right? I mean, if you're doing something where you just have like a dedicated downstream captioner that's just taking the live feed and always doing the captioning, that's fine, but, the live captioning isn't going to be quite as good because it's got to get a result out in real time to keep up, right? So when you can do it in advance or, whether it's through your NLE, some of the playback servers, the way they work is they'll actually do it file-based, recognizing that this is going to be in the schedule, so then it doesn't have to happen live and you're going to have better quality. So there's some other nuances around that as well.
Even services you might use, like captioning, like if you use a live captioner or if you use an Enco or any of the other engines, oftentimes there's an option to take, like if it's a state of the city address or something like that where they have a script, if you can plug that script into there, it helps increase that accuracy rate and all of that. It's the more data, the more tools that the right tools have, the more it can build upon and build that accuracy. All right, well, we've kind of killed our slides here, and we're phasing into what I would call the tips and tricks. And so I think, Dom, let's start with you. What are some tips and tricks you have?
Oh man, come back to me on that.
Okay, Jesse.
Let's see. So, I would say, for everyone, thank you. Definitely just a general tip and trick would be, I think to Justin's point, simplifying your workflow is key. And we're talking a lot about consolidating, right? Yeah. So the more tools you have in the mix, the more complex it's going to be. It's more that everyone needs to learn. So there's very high value to kind of trying to simplify and consolidate. If you do have a playout system that has a lot of this type of automation built in, that's a great place to start. Because a lot of the automation servers may be able to handle live streams coming in, or maybe they do their own multi-streaming integrated and it's already there, you have it, great. So I think, looking at that type of streamlining, because there are a million tools out there, you could look to do your captioning with this service over there, but then again, you may have your NLE is already ready to do it, or maybe your playout server already does it. So I think you're going to wind up saving a lot of headache, hassle, and all that tough integration stuff if you try to, stay within the tools you're already familiar with and working. That would be kind of number one tip.
Yeah, and then for me, one thing I've really been trying to take advantage of in recent years is just, we use Cablecast, and there's other providers, vendors here that, basically do the same thing that Cablecast does, and Cablecast has just implemented kind of like these batch functions where you can kind of like implement tags or just re-edit like a shit ton of videos at once of, whatever members have submitted, so you can quickly add tags to all these different shows at once, helps categorize things, or just do like auto scheduling features. That way you just really consolidate your workflow on the programming side a lot more smoothly. Johnny Pacina, who had my position before me, he would have to manually schedule things out like item by item down to like the second. And then Cablecast has since done like an autofill feature over the years, and like that has really streamlined the workflow. And then there's just some times where I just get overwhelmed. I just go to Johnny. I'm just like, Johnny, how did you do this? How did you do this for so many years? He's like, I don't know. But honestly, just take advantage of that. Honestly, just whatever your cable management system can do internally, just figure it out and make it work to your benefit. That's what I've had to do, especially in the last year and a half.
So my big takeaway I'd like everybody to take is that get somebody involved that actually understands networking when you're doing this. That doesn't mean you have to hire a broadcast engineer or a network engineer, but don't be afraid to actually talk to somebody about it. Usually the biggest issues in trying to do, whether it's get a stream out, bring a stream somewhere, do something, is you're not speaking the same language. And it's not that you're not trying to get the same result, it's that you have different verbiage and ways to get there. So find the right people to work with and work through those communication things to figure out, how do I communicate what I'm trying to do and get there? So if you don't know, broadcast engineer turning into somewhat of a network engineer, but broadcast engineer, you jump to, you make happen. Once you start to understand enough about networking, you understand that if they do too much jump to, they might make your thing work for half a second and then kill the entire network. Because the wrong one step there takes everything out. So it's about pre-planning. It's about taking those times and getting through those things. So just understand you've got to pre-coordinate things. The answer isn't no. The answer is we need to communicate and figure out how to get there.
This one might be totally obvious, but I'll say it anyway. For especially for live events, when you're dealing with streaming and networking, test in advance is a big one. And then the other one is think about how you're testing to make sure it's real world, because you might, go to the gym where the basketball game is going to be, and you test it, sometime where no one else is there, and like, this is great. Look at my speed test, everything's good. And now all of a sudden, you don't realize that, well, the Wi-Fi network there, everyone in the audience is on it doing their multitasking, and boom, you can't get that signal out. So,
I'll give you an example of that, actually. A very big State of the City address was being done. We were on a wired connection, and we were supposed to be a different network. Guess what we weren't? And guess what didn't happen? Right? So we were streaming great for the first 15 minutes when nothing was happening. The moment the mayor stepped up and all those press hit go live on their stuff, gone. And no way to fix it, right? So I would also add to that, have a backup, right? Even though you think that this is going to work perfectly, have a backup.
Well, and you need to do exactly what you're saying. I had the same problem. 2,000 people coming in the theater. The speaker said, no, I'm wireless, I'm fine. Here's the wire. Hook this up. Just trust me. And he fought me. And I said, okay, the wire's going to be here. When you die, hook it up.
My connection was wired.
Yeah, well,
So,
we
yeah.
had the same issue.
Yeah.
The beauty we had, I had private fiber coming in just for that. There you go.
And don't think that just because you're not using Wi-Fi. I've had live views back in the day when they first came out where you get 60,000 people at an event, and that Wi-Fi is sharing the same cellular systems that everyone else is. Now you can get FirstNet and all other things. But so even proprietary and paid systems are not valuable.
Correct. We used to go to PayPal to help support them do something. Hard as Silicon Valley, and couldn't get a signal out because there was too many people in the wrong world. Half of that's because they're blocking signals because they want to make sure nothing is getting out of their campus, right? So.
That was the nicest thing Verizon did for us, was give us fiber every place we needed. When they were trying to get fiber out, cost us nothing. And if I hadn't asked, it wouldn't come.
That's right. All right. Final thoughts, gentlemen.
Something I kind of want to go back to talking about, like these mobile platforms, these mobile apps, is that aside from, talking about like, yeah, it's important to get your brand on these various apps, these various devices and whatnot. One thing I found to be very useful, and you guys may have not thought about, is you can look at analytical data to see what kind of traffic is going to these platforms. What are your viewers watching? How long are they watching for? Where are they downloading your app from? Over the time that I've looked at, even for the CMAC app, I've seen a few times like it was downloaded in the UK somewhere, once in China, and then if you have the capability of looking at like specific audience membership stats from like your cable system, like in this case Cablecast, I can really go down to the nitty gritty details of just like what VODs are being watched, how often, how many clicks, how many views, how long are they being viewed for. So that way, in terms of programming, you can kind of dictate as a station or as just your general programmer, like what kind of content should I be scheduling, when and what time, how long, that sort of thing. Maybe just consider doing outreach to your community and just be like, hey, what kind of content do you want to see more of? Like, oh, I want to see more historical pieces. And that can kind of just bring on that discussion of like, hey, let's try to make this happen. Let's see what programs do we already exist in our archive. What can we do potential outreach? Like here, we got the Fresno County Public Library. They do a lot of historical pieces, so they share that content with us. So it's like, okay, that's another partnership, right? That we always talking about partnerships, things like that. So it's a lot of different baskets of interplay to just make content come to life. So think about the analytical side too.
That's a great point. It's one of the big advantages of taking, leveraging all these streaming platforms is, the engagement and the analytics that you don't get on cable, period. So really it can be a great way to better get to know your audience, their viewing habits. You can see trends during the day, when are people watching what programs. And I think just another big takeaway would be really one of the messages here is you're trying to distribute to as many places as you can. And there's so many places now. So the only way you're going to be able to do that practically, it's going to come down to really good automation. So that's going to be the key to scaling this, and you always have to be thinking about how can I do this in a way that it can be ultimately fully automated across all these platforms, or it'll be impossible to keep up. So automation is going to be the key here.
And then I'll end with, be careful with those analytics because they are important, but when you have them, you also have proof of how much or how little your viewership may be. And if you've been telling someone what your cable things were and that's what they're counting on, and you now say 2 people watch this, right? So you just have to be aware and not afraid of that. But I think that comes back down to marketing.
But it was 10,000 on cable.
Totally.
You just can't prove or disprove it.
Totally. Right. So, but it is. Be aware of that. But it's the better way to grow is to have the data than to ignore the data. And then I hope that you just leave with, visit the vendors in that room, because if you are looking with, I agree, it's about workflow, and there's a multitude of solutions sitting in that room. So the less that you can do things onesie-twosie, the more that you can group together and create an actual workflow. Go visit those vendors and find out what offers they have for you and see where they fit in. All right, and that is our time. Thanks for coming, y'all.